Yeah,
I want to welcome everybody to the Real Estate Hour.
Yeah, it was you.
And we actually have a great panel for everybody here, including the gentleman who actually made this entire building possible, and this theater and the like. But I'm going to allow all the panelists to introduce themselves and give a little bit of an introductory remarks about what they do and what role that they fill within the real estate world, which is actually quite extensive. There are a lot of different pieces to that. First, my name is Michael Fragen, and I'm a board member of the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce, and I think that events like these are absolutely fantastic to connect from people and with each other, and the From community with business opportunities, and a lot of business opportunities that we see, particularly as a community, that's a opportunity for Parnassa is actually in the real estate field. And so these three gentlemen actually represent a wide diversity, I think, of functions within the real estate field. We have a developer, we have an attorney, and we have a real estate manager here with us. And so without further ado, I don't want to take up any time because nobody really came to hear me speak, just to ask questions. I know I'm going to go in order of seniority, but I'm going to skip that because I'm going to go.
Ralph.
I'm going to go in order of
Ralph.
Poisson, Sanya, much more important, the proprietor of Bellworks and the guy with the vision to make it possible. I know, that's why I'm going to skip that. So we're going to go informally. I'm going to start with Ralph Zucker of Somerset Developments, and Bellworks is actually his brainchild and creation. So thank you, Ralph, for hosting us, and thanks for being willing to serve on this panel.
Okay, so thank you very much, and welcome to Bellworks. As we like to say, welcome to the Metroburg. And I'll just talk very briefly. I think more or less everybody knows what we do. Somerset Development started a little over 22 years ago in Lakewood, New Jersey. We're called Somerset Development because I did my first project, and I was in a little trailer, and I was talking to the lawyer. He said, "You need a name for your corporation." And I said, "Oh." I looked outside the window at the corner of Somerset and East County Line Road, and I said, "How about Somerset Development?" So hence the name Somerset Development. We started out doing typical suburban sprawl, regular housing. Little by little, I got into what I would like to call urbanism. It's sort of the science of doing planning places for people rather than for their cars and for their trucks, and to make sure the fire engine could turn around and everything else. And that led, over the years, to us getting more and more innovative. Fast forward to 2008, when I walked into then Bell Labs, a vacant building. It didn't look, well, the bones looked like it looks today, but everybody had bet against this building ever being repopulated. But because we had this new urbanist tendency and like to develop places for people, we saw how this could become a pedestrian street on the lower level, mixed use, yada, 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 and spent 5 years repopulating, or actually repositioning Bellworks. It took us until 2013 to get the entitlements. So while the building was not archaic, the zoning was archaic. The zoning was totally, we were only allowed to have one use, office, research, and that was it. Today we have everything from residential, hospitality, office, restaurants, health, wellness, fitness, everything but a morgue and a hospital is pretty much how the zoning is. Along the way, we discovered this concept, as I mentioned earlier, Metroburg, which is a metropolis in suburbia. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart, and we stumbled upon a truism that even in suburban locations, especially in great suburban locations, people have a desire for an urban core, an urban comfort, an urban vibe, that urban cool that you want to, you know, we talk about in real estate about the millennials and the younger people, not only millennials, everybody wants that comfort and convenience that you get with a great downtown. So by creating a metropolis in suburbia, we were able to turn a vacant Bell Labs into Bellworks, and now we're taking our show on the road. And we actually are under contract to do the same thing in the suburb of Chicago, Hoffman Estate, Schaumburg, another 1.6 million vacant square feet, former AT&T building. And your partner keeps calling it, says, Ralph, when are we going to trademark the name Metroburg? So that's really my introduction.
Great, thank you very much, Ralph. Got a ton of follow-up questions, but we're going to go to Mark Levenson. And I said before that very little financing in real estate gets done in the state of New Jersey without Mark Levenson's involvement in some shape or form. He didn't challenge me on that, so I'm going to stick with that. Now I'm going to say that to the public. So in fact, now it's totally true because a lot of people heard it. So Mark Levenson is a partner at Sills, Cummis and Gross, and is on the financing side. I guess represents the banks. People who make real estate happen are the lenders in almost all cases. Let's put it that way. So Mark, why don't you give us some perspective on what's going on in the state of New Jersey from a lender perspective, and as well as more nationally.
So is the mic? Do I need the mic? Mic working? Okay. So I do want to, before I get started, we have a long history with Ralph. Ralph, our firm has done a lot of work over the years for Ralph, and I don't gamble, I don't bet, I don't advocate betting, but I certainly wouldn't bet against Ralph because what he's done here, I can go back 10 years, and it's worthy of a 1, 2, 3 hour lecture for you to hear all the points at which Ralph went through and devised to where he is today. And we were privileged to represent the lender. To close on the deal with Ralph a couple months ago. We had the closing here, and it's amazing what he's done. And how I measure whether a building and a complex is successful, when I came here to park for this event, not at 9 o'clock in the morning, but the parking lot was completely filled. The visitors lot was filled, lot A was filled, had to go really deep. It was like at Giant Stadium. So that really is a measure of whether a complex is successful. And Ralph has done a tremendous job, and Yasha Koach to you on that. Our colleague in crime to the left here works for the Kushner companies. We've done a lot of work with them as well. Have the long history with the Kushner companies and Charlie, and terrific organization, entity, doing a lot of great stuff. Did a lot of great stuff in Jersey, a lot of great stuff in New York. Going to go back to New Jersey as well. So it's really a privilege and pleasure to be with these two folks. Now, he did start with Ralph. Ralph may be younger or older than me, I don't know. But I've actually been through, I've been through 4 real estate recessions in my short I've been through 4 real estate recessions in my short career. And what goes up comes down, what goes down comes up. You're never as good as they say you are when you're high, and you're never as bad as they are when you're low. And what I think the value, I don't know, is Dubby Honig in the audience here? Is he outside still with Anthony? Anyway, he's done a tremendous job in terms of creating this conference. But I must tell you, the speakers before us were superb. And Anthony, he readily admits, the 11 days in the White House, and I've never seen anyone come back as sturdily and as strongly as he's done. And it's a lesson to be learned. Life throws you some punches. You just got to deal with it. Try to make lemonade out of the lemons, and that he really is a great example of that. There are a lot of great.
You still got to pay lenders.
I'm sorry.
You still have to pay lenders.
Well, you still got to pay your lenders. But Ralph can tell you how you figure out how to pay your lenders. Look, lending is what makes real estate go. We represent several lenders. We represent really one of the biggest lenders in the state, Investors Bank, a terrific bank. They do a lot of work in New York, a lot of work here. Money's what makes things go around, but you have to have skin in the game. You have to, as Anthony said, your summer home has got to be those servers in the closet. I've seen plenty of folks that start doing real estate development. They think that they're instant geniuses themselves. They start spending it, and then before they go to bankruptcy, they're hawked out to lenders and mezz lenders and hard money lenders. That's not where you want to be. You have to be smart about it. You have to put a plan together. You need to know your strengths, and you need to understand that if you only are putting up 10, 20, 30%, the bank owns you unless you're able to prove that you own more than the bank owns. And there are many elements and assets to it. Deals don't close overnight, whether it's a $1 million loan or a $10 million loan or a $50 million loan or $100 million or wherever Ralph is going to take us in the next deal. Closings can go on forever, multiple pieces of paperwork. The commitment doesn't mean you're done, it only means you're starting. And whatever piece of paper the bank wants you to sign, you have to be prepared to deal with it. You need good, smart people on both sides. If you don't have good, smart people on both sides, a deal doesn't get done. I always want to have a smart lawyer on the other side. I always want to have a smart business person on the other side, because if there really isn't a relative match of talent and competence, then a deal's not going to get done and no one wins. If a deal doesn't close, you can be the smartest guy or woman in the room. If the deal doesn't close, no one goes home happy and there's blame to share. So one of the lessons that we like to see, both when I manage my team and when I see the other side, we'd like to try to see people to the maximum extent possible try to roughly row in the same direction. You don't necessarily keep it a straight line. There are some zigs and zags. But if the parties aren't trying to get to the light at the end of the tunnel, then there will be no closing. And if there is no closing, then no one's going to be happy.
Thank you very much, Mark. And again, we'll have a number of questions initially for you on that. But I want to turn actually, good segue to Isaac Buchler of the Kushner Companies, Director of Operations, and probably not the sexiest title for the real estate industry to talk about operations. You know, when you think about operations, not necessarily associated with property, but property management and adding value to property is incredibly important to any type of company. You have to generate the cash flow and continue to add value. I think, as Mark said, you want to always improve the amount of value that you can create and the amount of equity that you create in the property so that the bank doesn't own you. So I guess that's part of what you do, is make sure that the bank doesn't actually own you in most of these cases. And you know, you're managing both in New York and New Jersey, so I imagine there's some differences between those. But if you can enlighten us about what your job entails on a daily basis and what you know, what you're feeling as far as what your goal is within the company to try and you're not acquiring properties, but once Kushner Companies has them, you're actually looking to create that value.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us. It's an honor to be up here. I think, to your point, it's definitely something that we have a very strong focus on, at least at Kushner. You know, deals may look great on paper. They may have some, you know, today will be a little thinner than they used to be, but at the end of the day, it's the execution that makes the deal happen. So, you know, I'm sure Ralph would agree that this may have looked one way, and the execution of it was how it all came to what you see today. So I think high level, obviously we spend a lot of time on asset management and whether it's financially or operationally, focusing on some of the things that will maintain the success and maintain the operation. I think, you know, at least in my situation, ownership spends the same amount of time looking at the execution and the monthly/quarterly financials as they do on acquisitions and new deals. So, you know, it's my responsibility and my team's responsibility to make sure that whatever we present, whether it be to investors or to lenders or to whomever was a part of this initial deal, you know, to make sure that we're doing the best job we can do. And a lot of that is common sense, and a lot of that is, you know, other things that make, you know, staffing, different things. But I would say specifically in New York versus New Jersey, to your point, I think New York real estate, especially residential, has become more of a compliance/guidance game. It's more about how do you navigate the agencies, how do you navigate, you know, different facets of the legalities of the real estate there. Where in New Jersey, they have a little bit more leeway in how you operate your business, but again, you are, you know, the comps mean much more, and you have to focus on the market that you're in. And, you know, a deal in Chatham may not have anything close to a deal that you do in Long Branch. So, you know, there's a lot of different things that go into managing different assets, different locations. Whereas in New York, you know, you have a building on 504 East 12th Street, and you can have a building up the block. You're more or less in the same neighborhood. You're dealing with very similar tenancy, very similar, you know, business plan. You need to go and execute that.
Okay, great. So, actually, I'll start with you with just a little follow-up. If you can talk about yourself, because of the three, I know that you're the youngest. Okay, that much we've established. And being the youngest, you're the newest in the industry. How did you get in? What made you want to get into real estate? And just talk about your career path a little bit.
All right. I definitely am the youngest. I think real estate always appealed to me for multiple reasons. Number one, I had family and people I look up to who do and do well, and it was something that I always felt could be something I can do as well. The other side of the business is obviously the tangibility of it. You know, there's something that you look at and you see a product and you can go fix it or you can go change it or do something to it that you'll actually see the fruits of your labor. You know, obviously you have that in sales and other industries, but I think there's a bricks and mortar here that is, you know, is appealing to me personally that I really enjoy. You know, real estate also has the idea where you can look at it on paper and it looks excellent, and you go see it and you completely change your outlook on it. So I think there's a lot of it that is you touch and you feel, and that really is what appeals to me. How I got into it, somebody was lucky enough to take a shot at me, straight out of yeshiva/co. And I think one of the things I learned doing that role was working out of a car, no office, going to buildings every single day, not making much money, but at the end of the day, you know, you never be afraid to do the small things that will come back to you later and really differentiate you. You know, I'm one of the few people who work on the operations side by us who's actually been in a boiler room and done it and knows the inspectors and knows the HPD regulations and knows the OB regulations, and that's a credit to my experiences, which some may look at that and said, oh, you know, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? But, you know, those things really, you know, got me to the next step and propelled me to be able to do what I do today.
Okay, Ralph, I know you touched on this a second, but what did you see here as far as an opportunity that nobody else saw? I mean, this facility or this building or this entire complex or all the land around it was kind of the classic suburban anachronism. And you basically, I know you mentioned that you embraced the new urbanism, but a lot of people can say that. It's another thing to actually do it, and another thing to take a gamble on it. I know this is Jersey, and I know we're close enough to Atlantic City, but there are a lot of people who wouldn't go ahead and do that, and I'll throw the follow-up question to Mark, who saw as a lender as the possibilities here, or representing the lenders as the possibilities here. But what did you see that other people missed as far as, and I think right now 80% of your office space is occupied. You have residential going on all around. I know that part of that is, I mean, it's not yours, but you had the vision at least to go ahead and sell that, and talk about the path that you've gone and the long path that it's been to bring this project from inception to where it is today.
Okay, yeah, we're 8% leased and 80% occupied, but I think, what does the pasuk say? Sills aber. So I think a lot of it was just maybe I wasn't smart enough to know all the risks that this entailed. The fact is that timing in a way is everything, and you have to remember the time. So we went to contract for Bell Labs while the last limousines were pulling out of Lehman Brothers. So the real estate world had stopped spinning. There weren't any lenders. There was nothing going on. And Bell Labs had sat vacant as the largest vacant office building in the country for about 2 years at that time. So really, Alcatel-Lucent, who owned the building, was ready to take a stab at anybody who was crazy enough to try. And so if you think of that time, we were able to, as I said earlier, we saw an opportunity to create a mixed-use environment. We had that background, and there wasn't any competition. Nobody else wanted to do anything with Bell Labs. As a matter of fact, the owners, while we were under contract, were betting against us, and they were taking out permits to demolish the building because they didn't think we would succeed. And the municipality, it took them about 1.5 years to even talk to us, just because everybody thought it was such a crazy idea. They didn't really trust us at the time. I remember having a conversation right here. This room looked very different before we rehabbed it, but we did open up the building with Lucent's permission to the community, and we were almost booed off the stage when we started discussing our plans, primarily because people really didn't trust us that that's what we were going to do. So what helped us was the fact that everybody bet against us. And we were able to craft a contract that gave us 5 years to close on the building, because as crazy as I am, I wasn't going to buy it, nor did I have the funding to go in and buy it without the approvals in place. So we spent 5 years getting the entitlements, getting the building in position, and then by the time we closed, which was 2013, at that time, the world of real estate had started spinning again. Still, the market bet against us. And I remember the brokers from Kushner Wakefield who had sold us the building. When we went to them and said, hey, we'd like to hire you to represent us as our brokers to lease it out to the marketplace. They said, oh, Ralph, we just don't have the resources to commit to that building. Then we went to some of the other large brokers, and nobody had the resources to commit. Everybody was too busy, shockingly enough. And I started getting this feeling of pit in my stomach that maybe we have to stand on the street with a sign that says for rent. But little by little, we found people that did believe in our vision and sort of drank the Kool-Aid. And that's how we were able to put it together. So I think it's really not being smarter than anybody else, but I think, and obviously a huge amount of siyata d'shmaya. Really, if I look back at the steps and a lot of things that happened, even the way I found my partners to invest in this is a story for another time. But I went knocking on doors for 5 years, and there were no banks. Investors who Mark closed the loan for came in only after we started a substantial amount of leasing, and to their credit, even that, they were pretty much the only bank at the time that was ready to take that leap of faith. But I spent 5 years knocking on doors looking for funding, and the funding did not come from anybody that I approached, but literally, funding came from somebody who approached me, who saw an article, and just so happened.
How did you find your tenants?
Well,
Because these are not traditional suburban type tenants.
correct. So we took a contrarian approach to everything. And a typical landlord, you talk about operations, if you have a building that's 1.2 million net office, out of 2 million square feet, 1.2 is office, you wouldn't start running the building without an anchor tenant, at least 400,000 square feet, to justify the operation. We took a contrarian approach. Our first tenant was 1,200 square feet. And I remember signing a lease with 1,200 square feet, committing us to run the building for 5 years. And I'm thinking, this has got to be the craziest thing I've ever done. That lease led to another lease. We built out what we now call ready-to-wear offices. So we built out a suite of offices and literally made believe as if we had tenants. Who would they be? So we had 7 imaginary tenants, and we built out the lease for those 7 imaginary tenants. And then we put out a small pop-up cafe where you now see this large Bell Market coming and all this stuff. And we used to bring stuff from Bedelash in the morning and give it away at night for those imaginary tenants, so that when people come in, it would look like there was something here. And that's literally how we did it. We started with 1,200 feet. Our largest tenant is 350,000 square feet. We have, I think, 6 Fortune 500 companies in the building. And it was, we used to say in the office, crawl, walk, run. And first we crawled, then we walked, and now we're running.
So Mark, if Ralph is the dreamer, you're the realist. Give us a realist perspective on...
So there is a match. I mean, Ralph enunciated a couple of items. He talked about mitigation of risk and exit strategy. Friend here talked about operations, okay? You have to know the operations. Doesn't matter whether you're an accountant, investment bank, a lawyer. If you're in the real estate world, if you haven't been down and looked at the boiler or climbed the roof and seen the air conditioning or walked the stairways and see whether they're painted or clean, then you're really not doing yourself or your client a service. But a bank is always concerned with risk mitigation. Ralph, owners are concerned with risk mitigation. Ralph wants an exit strategy. Bank doesn't necessarily want Ralph to have the exit strategy that he wants, but we will agree to an exit strategy if we've reached our mutual goals. So that really is some of the challenges, and that's why you have phased lending, you have construction lending, you have temp lending, permanent loans, you have partnership and loans, you have CMBS lending. There's all sorts of different lending. The stronger and more secure Somerset and other entities get, the better access they have to the capital markets. But there is no question, timing is very relevant. Hashem is very relevant. It's you know, you can be very smart. You have to have good, smart people. Ralph is really a creative visionary. What he's done is amazing. But if you knew some of his people, some of them are very tough people to kind of negotiate and deal with. And if Ralph didn't have those folks, you know, he wouldn't be where it is right now.
Where's David Schreiber?
So Isaac, you're managing both residential and commercial, as well as retail for a company. Give us some perspective on some of the differences, also what you see, because you're seeing on a daily basis, or at least weekly, monthly basis, some of the changes that are going on within those verticals. And what are you seeing out there from an operations perspective and performance perspective of some of those assets?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, today's market, I'm sure everybody would agree, you have to be a little more creative than you maybe once needed to be in terms of deal structure. But you know, we can start with retail. Obviously, everyone's trying about retail and what's the future of retail and how is the online e-commerce going to affect it. You know, we have many thousands of square feet of retail, and what we're seeing is obviously the hair salons and the nail salons and those you can't do online, so you'll continue to have those in bricks and mortar. But you are finding people who are maybe with a little bit less of financial risk for them and exposure, they're willing to come and take a gamble on an area, and they say, well, you know, if so-and-so is there, I'll try to be there as well. And also it's become more of a curated situation where, you know, we as an owner can go in and say, okay, we want a market, a pharmacy, a deli, a coffee shop, and then you go find the people that agree with the vision. So maybe the for lease sign is not necessarily working anymore, but you can really try to attract those tenants, and that comes with relationships, and that also comes with proving a market. And I'm sure, you know, this is a perfect example of, I'm sure people now are probably coming and saying we want to be there, as opposed to someone having to go out there and say, you know, come to us, this is what's going to happen. In the office market, it's also happening. I think, especially in New Jersey, where, you know, at least, you know, we're looking for that type of tenant. You really do have to become a different market. You have to create this. You have to differentiate yourself in a big way. You know, in Brooklyn and Manhattan, that's happening, but here it's happening a lot less. And obviously the prices do show it, but bottom line, if you want to stay relevant and you want to stay occupied, you have to adapt. And if you don't adapt, you know, it's not going to work. Operationally, it's again, be creative, figure out ways to keep people around, structure deals that, you know, front loaded, back loaded, wherever you think it will work to keep the people around and maintain occupancy.
Michael, I just want to jump in on the comment about the retail, because the reality is there really was a comparison going back about 15, 20 years as corporations in Manhattan started downsizing the average square foot per FTE, full-time equivalent. So whereas everyone used to have an office, they were now starting to go to bullpens and hoteling and shared space. And senior executives and companies that I either worked for or represented, they thought, oh my God, you know, we can't afford to take any more space because New York's going to be the Wild West. There are going to be empty, vacant buildings all over the place. And guess what? 5 years later, more building in New York, more square footage taken, just people, you know, expand and you know, some back office moves in and it fills up. The same thing with retail. There's a lot of complaints or concerns about the death knell of retail. Well, look what Amazon's doing. Amazon, with what they're doing, they need endless warehouse space. They need endless distribution space. You may not call it retail, but with what they've done with Whole Foods, you see some of it creeping in. You see different types of retail. There are shopping centers out in California that, believe it or not, a couple of them have morgues in them. I'm not advertising that or advising that as a great use of space, but there are now hospitals in shopping centers. There used to never be a gym or a fitness center in a shopping center because of complaints of other tenants. It's different now. We work on you know, adaptive and readaptive uses of shopping centers. Shopping centers 20 years from now are going to be a lot different than what you see now. So this country has 350 million people. There will be more in 10 or 15 years. Land isn't growing. It's certainly not growing in New Jersey or New York. So, you know, you may have to wait a while, but it's all going to be good.
And I think to Mark's point, we're definitely seeing an uptick in the rents in the industrial world where people were trying to get rid of that stuff 5 or 6 or 7 years ago. You're definitely seeing the rent start to creep up. Whether even it's a quarter or 50 cents a foot, it's definitely happening.
So Ralph, actually both, Ralph and I, you guys both touched on the role of government in affecting real estate, from a developer's perspective and also from an owner's perspective. As a highly regulated business and very dependent on zoning and all and incentives as well as regulation. Talk for a second, I guess I'll start off, how government was able to benefit, well, I would say both contain, at least originally, by restrictive zoning, and then on the flip side, offer benefits for this facility and a lot of the other projects that you've done over the years.
So that's a whole session on its own. I will say that we definitely benefit as a developer who figured it out, so to speak. We benefit from the restrictive policies and the balkanization of the zoning in New Jersey. Every block is another fiefdom, every block is another mayor, another neighborhood, another planning board and zoning board, and different interests. So one of the reasons that New Jersey is suffering so much is because the state really has very little say, and they'll go vote for the governor and everything, but they have very little say in what happens, and there's what's known as home rule, and every municipality controls their zoning. So all of you in the audience who feel that things are too expensive or too difficult, or and as a developer, developers get blamed a lot, but really, and the state is busy with affordable housing and all those initiatives. If clearly the government would just get out of the way and allow common sense approaches to prevail. I'm not saying that should be the Wild West, but there are places like Houston that have very little restriction, and they do just fine, and they thrive. So the primary role of government in development is restricted, and it sort of limits and segregates a lot of the uses. Then the government steps in after they've done all the damage, and then they say, okay, now we're going to help you. And they do help, but they want to make sure that you have to go to them. So it's sort of like, think of a toll booth. You got to go to the government to help you fix all the problems that they've created in a way. And we benefited tremendously from government help over here. First of all, those of you who remember the previous administration, not so long ago, the Lieutenant Governor, Kim Gudano, she used to go around and say, call me on my cell phone. And we were here for a while, we weren't getting too much traction. I picked up the phone, I called on the cell phone, and a week later we had a meeting down in Trenton with Town Hall from Homedale, and really they helped facilitate the conversation. Fast forward to another effort that was led by your partner, Ted Zingari. We benefited from $55 million of Grow New Jersey funding in this building that was given or loaned, depending on the tenant, to various tenants, 3 tenants in Bellworks, to help keep jobs or move jobs from New York or other states into New Jersey. And all states have these programs, and now a lot of that is being challenged, but that was a big benefit. We benefited from a pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, where it allows us to scale. We could not have done this without a tax abatement of some sort, because you couldn't afford to pay $6 to $8 million in a vacant building. We would never start. And on and on and on. We put ourselves voluntarily on the National Register of Historic Places, which gave us a significant amount of funding from the federal government in terms of tax credits that we're able to partner up. So we partnered up with a national bank to utilize those tax credits that help serve as seed money. So when you're doing a development of this scale, government is both it's both a carrot and a stick. It's both the bane of your existence, but it's also necessary. But I think the most significant part of government is getting to a developer, is getting the entitlements and getting through that process. And what we found in that case is that government does what it's supposed to do. It represents the people. And if you don't go above and beyond the elected officials, all they will hear is the naysayers, because the silent majority is very busy going to work and doing their thing, and they just hear the few people that squeak up in town hall meetings, and pardon the expression, speak up, at town hall meetings, and are the NIMBYs, not in my backyard. And if you don't communicate directly to the public and convince them that what you have to do, we've done that in many cases where we've literally gone to the public. We did a job in North Jersey called Westmont Station, where we redeveloped a third of a town, Wood Ridge, New Jersey. 1/3 of the town. We built a train station, close to 1,200 residential units, shops, and there was an article written in the Bergen Record saying, "Where are the objectors?" We had 10 people at our planning board hearing, and 9 of them wanted to know where we're starting and what it was going to cost, because we had reached out to the community for 2 years prior to that and brought them into the process. So I think government it could be a good tool, but you definitely have to communicate and build trust with the community that you're trying to do something in.
And it's not just with regard to zoning, but it's everything, buildings, all the various regulations that go along on a daily basis that you have to comply with. And I think, Isaac, as you mentioned beforehand, a lot of what you do on the New York City side is just compliance work, if you will. New Jersey being altogether different, as Ralph talked about globalization of different jurisdictions that you have, and outside of New York City, you have that in New York as well, various layers of government that you have to deal with. A lot of people in the industry ignore governments essentially until it's too late, and they ignore those relationships until it's too late. Your company has actually done a great job on both sides of the river as far as cultivating government relationships, and been very successful at that. So talk a little bit about, look, some headline stuff aside, I believe that they've been very successful over the years, and I think there's no question about it.
Yeah, it's all lies, by the way. But
I think they call failures.
I think it's interesting. To piggyback off what Ralph said, I think there's benefits. The benefits are obvious, right? You get a pilot, you get different abatements that come with a lot of these things. But we look at it, or I'm sure other people look at it. Depending on the situation, you may get a pilot and you can pay X dollars in taxes, but you're also going to be required to use certain labor that's going to cost you 30% more. So does that really make sense for you in the long run? There are a lot of things that go into that. But I would say, specifically in New York City, where you have the 421As and the J51s and a lot of these different developers, the ICIP credits, a lot of these things that help the overall dynamic of the building financially, it is a strain, to run the building. You're required to have rent stabilization laws. Where New York City wants to go on the rent stabilization laws can cripple the entire market there. I mean, they're talking now, today at least, if things don't change, that they want to have where everything is rent stabilized, or they want to go back to where MCIs are temporary, which means landlords are not going to spend the money to put capital into buildings if in 2 or 3 years a different mayor or governor decides, well, sorry, everything you put in, you got to bring the rents back to what they were 5 years ago. And it's significantly affecting, I can tell you what we're seeing is that because the DHCR and rent stabilization has gone into this overdrive mode, they want to see history of rents for prior to 15 years ago. And how many landlords today that bought stuff in the 2012, 13, 14 market have that information? And it's affecting deals. It's affecting people being able to sell. It's affecting cap rates. It's affecting different things that are going into these deals because the regulators really want to crack down on, and what they don't realize is that people are just going to leave. No one's going to rent there. They're going to go to Jersey City. They're going to go here. They're going to go to Hoboken. They're going to go other places where we are seeing tremendous amounts of traffic because there's a 12-minute ferry from Jersey City to the World Trade Center area, and why not?
I actually wanted to.
How much, in your experience as a lawyer, how much of a difference does the regulatory environment make in decisions?
Well, I'm chair of the New Jersey Israel Commission also. We're very interested in bringing companies over, especially from Israel to New Jersey with jobs. And the previous administration, this administration, are very committed to that. And so I want to talk a little bit about what good New Jersey does in that, because there's a lot of criticism on some of these tax incentives programs. There's EDA, Economic Development Authority money. There's Business Action Center, which helps out. There's also the Grow New Jersey Awards. But at the end of the day, these are really not, giveaways like it's sometimes accused of being. These are basically amounts that get credited over time. So if you're getting an award, you're not going to pay corporate tax. You're going to get credit toward corporate taxes. No one's giving you millions and millions of dollars in cash and saying, come here, and if you don't say, shame on us. So the programs, you can quibble with whether it's the exact dollar amounts or it's the exact right companies, but overall, these programs have done a tremendous job in not only stabilizing the economy, but bringing 100,000 or more jobs to New Jersey over the last X number of years. And this administration is also committed to the same thing. On the issue of regulation, there's no question, people like to, if you ask people as a whole, they love to attack government regulation. Government regulation is bad, let's rip it up and throw it out. If you're suffering cancer, or you're in welfare, or you need food stamps, or you want your education you want funding for yeshivas to be beyond just public school funding, you want to have daycare, then all of a sudden people have a different view. So there's always a balance. We really don't want our water contaminated. I mean, I'm not in favor of huge regulation. New Jersey is tremendously regulated. It's also one of the densest states in the country. So there's a balance, and people are there to speak out for or against. And out here it's not as dense in New York City. When Ralph's done 5-10 years from now, it'll be as dense as Greenwich Village. So,
but the patchwork of different municipalities, the boroughs, the townships. The fact that you have to go, and we have the same thing where I live in Nassau County.
Yeah.
The fact that you have to go sometimes for approvals to 5 different boards at
yes,
a time.
yes.
The time that takes from a guy like Ralph, the time that it takes out of his plans and the money that costs, or something, or from Isaac's perspective, the amount of overburdensome extra money that they have to spend. What could you estimate is the cost factor?
So there are 566 municipalities in New Jersey. Some people joke that every block has its own municipality, and it's a problem. I mean, sometimes some of these municipalities have combined, but to have 566 police departments and fire departments, et cetera, it's a tremendous waste of resources. It's very clear, anyone in the business world knows that you can combine multiple of these, and you can be more efficient, save money, save pension money. But unfortunately, it's not as easy to accomplish as you can prescribe, because there are people that have the positions in those municipalities. Some people like the smallness. So it's a tough issue. I would have thought over the course of the last couple of years, with some of the problems that the state went through economically, I would have thought we might have moved a little bit quicker on the pace of consolidation. We're not there yet. And I don't know if we'll get there that quickly, but there's no question that adds a tremendous, not only you have municipalities, you then have county government, you have state government, you have federal government. There's no question there is a lot of regulation and it costs. I can't quantify it, but it costs a lot of money. Lenders now have all sorts of compliance regulations. Accounting firms have compliance regulations. We are in a compliance regulated environment, and I don't see it really changing in the near future.
I just want to touch on something you said earlier about the benefits. And I understand that there's a huge conversation going in Trenton right now as to whether Grow New Jersey specifically should stay in place or not. And you mentioned that it doesn't cost the state anything. It's from future revenue generated from payroll taxes. I would also point out that in Bell Works specifically, when we're full, we should have about 8,000 daily employees besides for visitors. So the 3 companies is about at least 100 companies already here and more to come. 3 companies got Grow New Jersey funding spread out over 10 years. So if you look at the leverage, for example, Guardian Life moved here from New York State, and they elected, I think because of the paperwork, not to apply, even though they could have gotten Grow New Jersey money. They didn't even apply for the Grow New Jersey. Think of the jobs that were saved and created. So by leveraging A little bit of state money, and real estate is all the leverage and the jobs created here that would have been lost by a little bit. So if anybody's listening to Trent, I know Duvey's the most connected guy around. So Duvey, maybe you could tell the governor that I know he likes what we're doing here, and there really is a little bit of seed money goes a long way. And before they throw that out for political expediency, definitely something to talk about.
Okay, Ralph, we're getting towards the end of our time, so I also want to open this up for questions if we can. Duvey decide that as well, being the most powerful man in New Jersey right now. Ralph, talk about the value of public relations for a real estate developer. And you've had some good fortune. I mean, last week the New York Times talked about the demise of the suburban office campus, but the one bright spot is Bellworks that they identified. I'm sure there are others, but the fact is that you got that spot there. The Journal has talked about you. Other publications are talking about this. What's the value there of that type of earned media that you get, and how do you go about getting it?
Well, it's priceless, and we really spend very little on marketing. When we budgeted for Bellworks, we typically didn't budget enough for anything. But the one place that we budgeted more than enough was in advertising, because we really do virtually no print advertising. I mean, very, very little, only when we really have to, because of all the media and social media that we get. We have a public relations firm. Some of those people, Beckerman Public Relations, you know them as well. They do a great job. And I think it's a big part of it. You mentioned you have to differentiate, and we have bi-weekly marketing meetings, and we open the meeting saying differentiate or die. So when you're different, people talk about you, and the old story that dog bites man isn't news, and man bites dog is news. So we're the man that bites the dog, because we're doing something different, and the reporters are looking to write about it. We're really gratified, and we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop, because I'm sure that the first time we do something wrong, the press will be all over us. But right now we are riding a wave, and for example, we went to Chicago. So here it took us 5 years to communicate our vision, and over there it took 5 minutes. And the Chicago Tribune heard about it and wrote a great, even an opinion piece, and all the press. Because the press likes a good story. So public relations is key, and your perception, perception is everything. Some old stories about it, but we'll talk about it here. So.
Sure. Isaac, you work for a very high-profile company, and you're a firm guy, and I'll just orient this in a little bit from the firm question, because I think it has to be asked. Real estate's is a lot of Orthodox Jews in the real estate industry. I'm not making any news by saying that. And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes that can be bad. How do you feel, whether it's government or others out there, even professionally, even outside of the company, but are there challenges that go along with being a firm person at a high-profile company in the industry?
Well, I'm obviously lucky to work for people that are Orthodox. So, while it's an interesting environment, I think they definitely respect and they do everything that I do. So, from a company perspective, Baruch Hashem, no issue. I think globally, you just have to realize that people respect that. People, especially in New York City, and we're lucky to live in these areas where they see it every day. But in New York City, I can tell you that people respect that you're holding to. There's almost none of that left. So you're holding on to something, and I only see it as a positive. You go to events now, they're almost always offering you kosher food. So there's a certain level of understanding that this is the market you're in. This is where we work. This is where we live, and I've never seen it affect me at all.
Okay, I'll be a little more blunt then, because I wanted to ask the question nicely, but I'm going to go ahead. If there's a scandal, and there inevitably are, and there have been, there's a tendency out there, and just like Lakewood, I'll give sometimes being a little controversial within New Jersey in some places. Does that affect everybody in the industry? Does that tarnish everybody in the industry? Does that have negative repercussions as far as how you deal with outsiders?
I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that, but
fair enough.
I mean, it depends how you look at it. I mean, people are people. People make mistakes. Doesn't necessarily need to be a religion thing. We just happen to have the most real estate in the tri-state area. So if something happens in real estate, it's news that, you know. But I don't think it. You know, it's all about the people who are doing it. And if they're doing something wrong, doesn't mean that I'm doing something wrong.
I think if you asked that question 20 or 30 years ago, it might have been more appropriate, just in terms of the presence of Orthodox Jews in the industry and also where anti-Semitism was back then. It's very different now. Unfortunately, there's scandals all over the place, and I don't really think that people, at least from what I see, hear, and feel and observe, I don't think people are placing Orthodox Jews in any different light because someone may be caught in this scandal or that scandal. I don't think it causes that tarnish that maybe 15 or 20 years ago, and not that it deserved to happen with that tarnish, but 15, 20 years, 30 years ago, there'd be more of an implication. I don't see it today.
I'm going to gently disagree, but I want to differentiate between scandal and, let's say, bigotry or anti-Semitism as it relates to development. So I agree with you that I don't think scandal affects anybody. I actually had a conversation with the editor of the Asbury Park Press at a Divvy Honing event right here, and he said, "Can we write an article about it?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Why not?" And I said, "Because if I do something good, you're going to say, Ralph Zucker, Somerset Development, Homedale-based business. But if we do something bad, you're going to say, Ralph Zucker, a Lakewood rabbi." And so he said, I will write it. I'll mention Lakewood in the article. And we had a very nice article in the Asbury Park Press a few months ago that did, and I was very proud of it, that it did talk about the Lakewood roots and the fact that I'd gone to yeshiva and everything. So I felt good that we were able to affect the narrative. And thank you, Dudley, for sitting me next to the editor at that event. But I will say that I disagree with you gently on the fact that there definitely is, even today, I don't know if we call it anti-Semitism, but a discomfort with Orthodox Jewry. It's no secret. I mean, it's no secret. Just look at what's going on in Jackson, Thames River, and everywhere else. Look at the zoning that was exclusionary zoning, that how communities around Lakewood went ahead and sort of barricaded themselves with zoning. I'm working now with a yeshiva in upstate New York that is dealing with the zoning that was put in place specifically to make it difficult for a yeshiva dormitory to open. They literally saw the wave coming, and they went ahead and they said, "Oh, we permit dormitories, but the amount of land that you need for it," so they could try to slide it under the federal guidelines. But even here in Homedale, when we came in, talking about PR, we monitored the blogs, and the blogosphere was really, really nasty. I remember seeing blogs that said, "Hey, I saw a Hasidic-looking person in Lowe's or something, so they're coming." And it's definitely an undercurrent and should be recognized. And I think we have to put our just keep on doing our thing and proving that we're good neighbors and everything else. But to say that it doesn't exist, I gently disagree. You're older, so you can.
Well,
I'm glad we have some disagreement.
it exists. I just think the impact is, your success multiple. I mean, 30 years ago, other than with Hashem's help, you wouldn't be there because the banks, but the banks, the anti-Semitism that was there in the banks, many years ago, it just, I mean, the bank, I can only speak for the banks that I represent, not that I influence their policy. But I have closings in our office. Not only are there people, the yarmulkes, there are people with tzitzis flying out, with people wearing tzitzis over their jackets, and maybe some people turn their heads when they see it. But it is so. You're right. We can always improve more, but where we are now from where we were, 20, 30 years ago is remarkable.
Yeah.
I would just like to make one comment. Our whole mission is to bridge all this together. And I really feel that They're recognizing it from a state level and from a government level, seeing how we're bridging together, including today. You saw the crowd, diversified crowd of people, and we're able to influence and show we're sharing our innovation with others to the extent that they just voted on in New Jersey now. Well, me and Ralph had this conversation 2-3 years ago, and he said, I'm crazy, but he loves it. When I shared it in my vision to introduce Economic Development Day to the state and on a federal level, and it was voted on this week on this, in the state, and the Yitzi Hashem is going to be passed, and we're going to have one day a year like Labor Day, Economic Development Day, modeled off all our Jewish Chamber of Commerce, innovation, sharing it with the whole state of New Jersey, and sharing it eventually with other states as well, sharing our success with others. And once you go that route, you expand beyond the circles and you give and you don't take, and they feel it and they recognize it. As today we have a letter from the president, from the governor, I really feel that we're in a whole different light. That I feel a big challenge the religious people have is when they just focus on their own circles and we make ourselves small-minded in the economic development aspect. We don't have to sacrifice who we are, what our religion is, but we do have to make a Kiddush Hashem, and we do have to show that we're open beyond our circles to share and give. And once we do that, it's acknowledged above and beyond the proofs in the pudding.
Any other questions? Yep. Hey. I guess we're holding all the mics here, so anybody has a question? Start over here. If you don't mind just stating your name before you ask.
Saul Bauer, specifically for Mark. A lot of times we go to a deal with real estate. A lot of times we go to a deal with real estate, banks promise you over your head. When it comes to the end, when you really do the deal, you start cutting back with a lot of reasons. How to avoid it and who's at fault for it?
I think you have to start with a commitment letter. A bank issues a commitment letter, and the commitment letter is what the bank is expecting. Many developers, and not just in this community, I've represented developers for a long time. Developers end up being successful because they're dreamers. They're big dreamers, and many times they're successful like Ralph. There are some that aren't. So the bank's role, again, it's their money, the shareholders' money. The bank's role is to ensure that the commitment is met and adhered to. And oftentimes a developer or a borrower will say, well, I can get that done, I can get that done, I can get that done. But if you don't get it done at the end, the bank needs those items committed to. So really, to answer your question very precisely, when you receive a commitment letter, you really got to look at it and honestly say, can I meet this bank's requirements? And if you can do it, you'll get there. And if 50% of them are items you're going to have to stretch and go like this and try to get there, then maybe that's not the bank you should be dealing with. But beside the commitment letter, the banker who you're dealing with is usually the one who you should be having these honest conversations with at the outset. Because the banker doesn't make a living if deals don't happen. The banker itself versus the bank is really on your side. I mean, he's not going to do a loan he or she is not going to do a loan that's going to put the bank in jeopardy. But if a banker has bought into you and what your product is and what you want to do, then he or she really wants to help you get to the finish line. So pay attention to the commitment letter and have a good relationship with your banker and honestly discuss, whether you can really meet what the bank wants.
If the banker writes a term sheet, that's really zero. They promise the term sheet.
A term sheet is subject, I don't want to belabor it for everyone else here who doesn't really deal in this, but a term sheet lists 10 items. The term sheet references a commitment letter. A commitment letter is 10 pages. I'm making it up. It could be 6 pages, it could be 20 pages. The commitment letter has an awful lot of stuff in there. It talks about title, it talks about violations, it talks about know your customer rules, it talks about guarantees, it talks about backup, it talks about your history. So the term sheet is just like a term sheet if you were buying a house. You may say you're going to buy a house for $300,000, close in 30 days, and you're going to pay $10 for the furniture. Okay, when the contract comes from the lawyer, it's 12 pages long, and there's a lot of stuff in there. Casualty, condemnation, force majeure, all sorts of things. So it's the same thing. The term sheet is a good starting place. It's where you may have a deal. But, you know, you got to be working with your banker, and you got to know you're subject to the terms of the commitment.
I would like to thank everyone for participating in today's panel, our panelists. First of all, this was beyond an amazing panel. I'm literally blown away. I don't know if you were here, Ralph, before when I acknowledged thanking Bellworks for being our sponsor and hosting us today. Me and Ralph, sometimes we joke around like who's crazier, but I think the vision
Definitely
today,
Dovey. Definitely Dovey. Definitely Dovey. Definitely you. Definitely you, Dovey.
And you know, so really, Ralph, you know, just sharing a vision. Ralph asked me, Dovey, what should I speak about? I said, speak to people about like taking a vision and creating things in real estate, because we're very familiar with copy, how do they say copy?
Monkey see,
Monkey see, monkey do. And that's the whole real estate market. And then the whole coming to crying. Matter of fact, I met someone that, you know, literally this weekend, and he told me that everyone's trying to sell off, they can't do it quick enough because the rates are going up. So the people don't even know what they're doing. Went up, went up, went up. And I've been there and done that before, and that's why we're here today, because I went through a situation myself. But at the same time, like, Ralph, when we had our event and this, over here, and the building was still empty, we had one Saturday guy. He was there, and he says, "Dovey, can you raise the gas in the barrage?" You remember that, Ralph? He tells me, "Oh, we can make this out in a wedding can, have parents people over." And Ralph says, "No way." But people look at things different ways. But you gotta have the right vision, and look where it's holding today. I mean, no one believed in a million years, you know, how quick the success in Siyata Shmaya was achieved in this building, and how reciprocated it is to be able to host such an event and empower thousands of people today. And I want to thank Mark Levenson, our Vice President of the Orthodox Jewish Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey Affairs, New Jersey Israel Affairs, for sponsoring the sponsorship of this panel, and as well as Isaac Buchler, who came here to represent Kushner, the director of Kushner Operations, and he told me that when he told Charlie about it, Charles said to him that there's no better ambassador to represent his company than Isaac. And I second that. So it's time, it's effort, and it's valuable time from valuable people, and they're all here today to help you, empower you. And of course, our moderator, Michael Fragen, beyond amazing, and he's running our Five Towns committee, and we've done events there, and we're doing more events there on behalf of Michael, who inspired it. We did a successful event. As a matter of fact, our last event, Michael coordinated, made it on the front page of the Herald, and the front page is Jewish Star, and we didn't push it. So obviously the value is there, and he is running for mayor of Lawrence, and we endorse him. And hopefully in a week or two, we'll get a good news that he won. Thank you all. Thank you very, very much for being here, for attending.
Say hello to Emily. Tell her we love her. Give her
all of us working together to help empower each other. Thank you.
Ralph.